There are many famous actors who spent years of their lives working on projects they hate or come to hate, and in this video we'll take a look at 5 of them, starting with Henry Cavill. When Henry Cavill got cast as Geralt of Rivia in The Witcher, it was like a dream come true for him. He's a longtime fan of the Witcher book series by Andrzej Sapkowski, and he's always loved the fantasy genre as a whole. Despite what it seems on the surface given his looks and physique, he's actually a really big nerd, something he's admitted himself on many occasions. He plays video games, reads comic books, and even paints miniature figurines. So when he landed the lead role in The Witcher, Cavill was super excited to bring this character he'd known for years to life.
I have been a fan of the fantasy genre since I was a boy. I'm a big PC gamer as well, and so I spent a lot of my time playing role-playing games in that genre and played the Witcher games. I played The Witcher 3 through twice, and I just wanted to make sure that Geralt was represented as accurately as possible.
At first, everything seemed to go perfectly. The first season of the show was a huge success, attracting massive viewership numbers and quickly making The Witcher one of the most popular series on Netflix. The showrunner had a vision of making at least 7 seasons of the show, and after the first season's performance, it looked like that could become a reality. When asked about whether he'd be on board with that during a 2021 interview, Cavill responded saying, "Absolutely, as long as we can keep telling great stories which honor Sapkowski's work." But therein lay the problem. While initially promising they'd be faithful to the books, the showrunners began making significant changes as early as season 2. They added new characters and plot lines as they wished, giving little regard to what the fandom wanted, and Cavill had to fight tooth and nail to make them stick to their promise.
I'm the most annoying guy on set because I'm saying, excuse me, you do realize that this should be happening and they wouldn't do that, and you haven't read this, that means this would be impossible. And everyone's just going, Henry, just shut up and do the thing. And I'm like, I don't want to do the thing because he wouldn't do it this way, and he can do this.
He wouldn't just give in and do as they said, and because of this, tensions between him and the writers and producers began to grow. The issue was he was the only one fighting his corner, so to some it looked like maybe he was the problem and not them.
So do you correct people?
I don't necessarily...
I am effusive about getting the being loyal to the source material. Let's put it that way.
Okay.
Yeah.
So yes you do.
As much as he tried, there was only so much Cavill could do, and a lot of the changes made by the writers went ahead, and sadly, this ended up having disastrous consequences. Audience satisfaction for season 2 of The Witcher dropped off a cliff, with threads like, "The writing for The Witcher season 2 is awful," gaining a huge amount of traction on Reddit. Then, during production for season 3, Cavill made an Instagram post announcing that he wouldn't be returning for season 4. This was a shock to viewers because he was clearly a huge fan of The Witcher, but soon enough, the reason for his exit became clear. Reports emerged explaining that he'd been very close to quitting after season 2 due to constant disagreements with producers, but he decided to stick it out for one more season. During production for season 3, the situation got even worse as the showrunners were changing and adding storylines all over the place, and Cavill simply had enough. What started as his dream job and passion project had turned into something he couldn't stand to be a part of. The ratings for season 3 speak volumes, as the audience score dropped to an abysmal 19%, and it makes you wonder how things would have turned out if the showrunners had just stuck to their promise. Cavill proved himself as a man of integrity. He won't ruin a character and franchise for a paycheck. He had the balls to just say no and walk away. Respect. In February 2022, Dakota Johnson was cast to play the lead in Madam Web, a film in Sony's Spider-Man universe. The movie is about a paramedic who discovers she has psychic abilities after a near-death experience. At the time it was announced, the SSU was seriously struggling, as they'd just come off the movie Morbius, which was a catastrophic flop. They needed Madam Web to be their lifeline, but during the promotional tour for the movie, it became clear it was going to be anything but. The main thing that gave that away was the interviews with Dakota Johnson. In almost all of them, she seemed completely disinterested in talking about the film and behaved as though she just didn't want to be there.
Oh dear. Here we go.
Dakota, this is the first appearance of Madam Web in Marvel Comics. I ordered this just to bring it today.
Wow.
Have you had a chance to actually physically hold this and flip the pages?
I actually have, but this one looks like a first edition, is it?
Yeah, it is a low grade. It was the best I was able to find on like a reasonable price.
Whoa.
And that sleeve is in there on the actual first page where your character shows up.
Yeah.
So when you hear about the role, do you turn to the comic? Do you what is it like to see it? It's this many years ago this was published, and now you get to bring it to life. Nobody's ever done that before.
Yeah. Very cool.
LMFAO, she doesn't give a rat's ass about this character at all. I feel sorry for this guy. He was legit trying to get excited with enthusiasm, but she just can't because she knows the movie is so bad. At this point, Dakota hadn't actually seen the final cut of the movie, but from the way she was acting, you could tell she didn't have much faith in it. Still, you'd expect her to keep up appearances and at least pretend it was worth watching, but she did the complete opposite.
The winner for Best Picture at the Oscars will be...
Oppenheimer?
That's incorrect. It's actually Madam Web.
Okay.
It's gonna be a Madam Web sweep, I think.
Okay, that will also piss people off. Madam Web sweep the Oscars. Can you imagine?
Oppenheimer gets like Best Sound, Madam Web, everything else.
Okay, sure.
Madam Web underwent a significant number of script rewrites and reshoots, so the final product probably wasn't what Johnson initially had in mind. However, she gave it away that her investment in the superhero genre wasn't really there to begin with.
I mean, what percent of Marvel movies have you seen? Let's be real. And this isn't meant as a negative. Like, again, just...
4%.
4%.
Which is like 15 minutes of one.
Can you name the 3 Spider-Man Tom Holland movies?
Yeah.
Should I just go on faith?
Yeah.
Oh.
Spider-Man, here he comes.
Here he comes, yes.
That's
yeah.
number 1.
Yep.
Spider-Man, and he's back. And the other one, the last one is the Goblet of Spider-Man.
Dakota was really just there to collect her paycheck and leave, which is savage given how critical this movie was for the future of Sony's Spider-Verse. She seemingly made no effort with her co-stars as well, based on their response to the interview question, who's the most likely to leave you on red?
All of us.
No, we were all pretty
No, we respond to each other.
We're good at that.
Dakota definitely left me on red. Dakota's never replied to me. Never. It's been 2 years.
It's safe to say that with everything on display during the press tour, people weren't that hopeful about how the movie would turn out, and when it was released in February 2024, all suspicions were confirmed. The movie was really bad, and it got ripped apart by both critics and moviegoers. There are numerous review videos online with millions of views describing it as everything from a disaster to the worst superhero movie ever made, and in response to the immense hate, Dakota said this: "Unfortunately, I'm not surprised this has gone down the way it has. I probably will never do anything like it again because I don't think I make sense in that world, and I know that now. But sometimes in this industry, you sign onto something and it's one thing, and then as you're making it, it becomes something completely different, and you're like, wait, what? But it was a real learning experience. And of course, it's not nice to be a part of something that's ripped to shreds, but I can't say that I don't understand." Game of Thrones was one of the most popular and influential TV shows ever made. It drew record-breaking viewership numbers, became a cultural phenomenon with countless memes and references, and elevated the TV experience to the heights of a blockbuster movie. This made the 8th and final season of the show one of the most highly anticipated television events ever. But despite all the hype, it turned out to be a complete and utter disappointment. You see, the showrunners and head writers for the show, Dan Weiss and David Benioff, were eager to move on to other projects, so they tried closing out the show as quickly as they could. This meant the final 2 seasons had 7 and 6 episodes instead of the normal 10, resulting in rushed storylines and numerous plot holes. HBO likely would have funded more seasons, which would have given them ample time to do all the characters and storylines justice, but Dan and Dave weren't interested. They wouldn't even budge when George R. R. Martin, the author of the books the show is based on, begged for it to be extended.
Why is it ending?
I don't know. Ask David and Dan when they come through. We could have gone to 11, 12, 13 seasons, but I guess they wanted a life.
You wanted it to keep going.
Well, you know, if you've read my novels, you know there was enough material for more seasons. They made certain cuts.
A big part of the reason they didn't want to continue was because they were in talks to create a new Star Wars trilogy, and committing to Game of Thrones for more time would have gotten in the way of that. But it seemed to work in their favor as they signed the deal ahead of the release of Season 8. However, karma eventually came back to bite them. During the final table read for season 8, some of the cast were reading the script for the first time, including Kit Harington and Conleth Hill, and you could see from their reactions how disappointed they were. Kit had his head in his hands in disbelief as he read it, and Conleth looked completely inconsolable after he learned the fate of his character. When it came time for the press tour ahead of the season premiere, you could tell something was off. The cast kept giving vague responses to many interview questions, using language like "it will shock you" and "you're in for a ride," and when they did say anything positive, it seemed forced and overly rehearsed.
How do you feel about the way that it ends?
There are no better writers in television than Dan Weiss and David Benioff. They ended it brilliantly, better than I could have imagined, and you people are in for it.
They were doing their best to stay professional, which meant hiding how they truly felt. But with the sheer number of appearances they made, there were points where the mask inevitably slipped.
He's bringing all the dead people back to life, and they put the women and children in a crypt with all the dead people. So, Tyrion is smart, but I guess not that smart.
Have you shot your final scenes yet? And are you happy with how things ended? Yes. She didn't say yes. You didn't say yes.
Best season ever.
It's the best. It's the best season ever.
This season has really outdone the others in all regards.
Are you all happy with the way with the outcome of the show? Personally,
But I hate to tell you that unfortunately Barristan is gone.
Were you gutted about that on a personal level?
I was gutted because, I mean, a number of you I'm sure have read the books, and I've read the books. And I had reason to expect, oh, I've got a journey here. In fact, if I'm honest, I thought, oh, I'm really looking forward to this season. I'm going to have more to do. I'm going to get my teeth into something I'm really looking forward to.
Did you have words? Did you say anything to them?
I did ask and give an argument why I thought Barristan should stay. But at the end of the day, I mean, you know, Dan and David, you know, they've worked out what they wanted to do.
Character development. Lob it all in. But I really need to shut up.
You're brave.
Oh my God.
I don't know.
But that's what
Joe's
it felt
not going to be in Star Wars.
I couldn't let you go without asking you a little question about Game of Thrones.
Sure.
If you could describe the season finale of Game of Thrones in one word, how would you describe it?
Disappointing.
Disappointing?
No, epic. I don't know.
Epic.
One of those ones.
Some people will be satisfied and others not so much.
You've got to remember that these actors each spent near enough a decade of their lives working on this show. They invested so much into their characters and wanted more than anything for their stories to have a satisfying conclusion. Take Emilia Clarke, for example, who played Daenerys Targaryen. Emilia faced immense personal hardship during production as she suffered 2 brain aneurysms during the show's run. She had to undergo open brain surgery and was in such a bad state that she asked her doctors to just let her die. Despite this, she persevered, returning to the show and giving her all to her role. Yet after years of hard work building her character up, Dan and Dave ruined Daenerys in the space of a single season. It was a spit in the face, and it's honestly sad to think how Game of Thrones could have ended if they hadn't tried to cram so much into 2 seasons. In the years since, many of the actors have come out expressing their disappointment about how the story unfolded. The irony is, after the dreadful reception season 8 received and the backlash Dan and Dave got as a result, their deal to create Star Wars fell through. Apparently this was due to creative differences between them and the production company Lucasfilm, but it's widely believed that they lost the deal because of how they butchered the end of Game of Thrones. From 2008 to 2012, the Twilight series had teen girls all over the world in a chokehold. Its blend of romance and the supernatural completely hooked the young adult audience, and the love triangle between Bella, Edward, and Jacob was at the heart of its success. The saga became a global phenomenon, with the books selling over 160 million copies worldwide, and the movies grossing over 3.3 billion at the box office. Its leads were all thrust into superstardom, which for most actors would be a dream come true, but for Robert Pattinson, it was a nightmare. From very early on, Pattinson was open about his discomfort with playing Edward Cullen. He took the role without much thought or understanding of how big the franchise would become, and after it blew up, he ended up feeling trapped. He didn't buy into it like other people did, and he struggled with being pigeonholed into the teen romance genre. The whole world was obsessed with Edward Cullen, seeing him as this perfect, brooding heartthrob, but Robert thought the character was just plain weird.
If Edward was not a fictional character and you just met him in reality, you know, he's one of those guys who'd be like an axe murderer. He's like ultra polite, really formal all the time, like, let me open the door, let me carry the bags. It's like literally, like, you could just tell he just freak out one day and shoot someone. When he put the bare facts out, he tells I've killed 40 or 50 people. And he's like, you really shouldn't. And I want to kill you so much. Every single day, every moment I'm with you, I desperately wanted to kill you. And she's like, I don't care, I love you. And it's like, well, there's definitely something wrong with her, and there's very obviously something wrong with me.
He didn't stop at criticizing his character, as he also had a lot to say about the author of the books, Stephanie Meyer.
When I read it, it seemed like it was a book that wasn't supposed to be published. I was convinced that Stephanie was convinced she was Bella. And especially when she says, oh, it was based on a dream, and it's like, oh, I had this dream about this really sexy guy, and she just writes this book about it. It's like, this woman is mad.
It's hilarious that Pattinson got away with this. Most actors would be too scared of the possible repercussions, but he was happy to say whatever the hell he wanted. I mean, he definitely could have hidden his disdain for the movies, but he made it obvious at every opportunity.
I gotta ask you, why are you guys still driving cars when you have the ability to run so fast?
There's a lot of stuff in the Twilight world that doesn't make any sense. It's like, why are they still going to high school? Like, up until last year, they're 100 years old.
Did your Twilight experience turn out to be what you expected?
Oh.
Were you happy with your pay?
I don't know. Could have been better.
Millions of Twilight fans out there just cannot wait to see this. It's very almost heartbreaking because they don't want it to be over.
Yeah.
It's a little bittersweet, isn't it? For them. Yeah.
Really nobody hates Twilight more than Robert Pattinson. It's true, and as soon as the movies ended, he began doing everything in his power to distance himself from them, taking on roles in indie projects that were as far removed from Twilight as humanly possible. Of course now, he's managed to completely redefine himself and is a superstar in a different way, but it's funny to look back and see where he came from, and how much he hated the franchise that made him famous. Megan Fox's rise to fame seemed unstoppable after she starred as Michaela Baines in Transformers, Michael Bay's blockbuster action film about giant robots fighting for dominance. Her performance was praised, and she quickly became a household name, with one of her scenes in particular being talked about for years to come. Everything seemed to be going great, but ahead of the release of the second installment, it was announced that she wouldn't be returning for the third movie, and she was replaced by Rosie Huntington-Whiteley. At the time the announcement was made, it was framed as a mutual decision between her and the studio, but there was a lot more to the story than they let on. Fox and Bay had a rocky relationship almost from the very beginning. Bay, who was recognized for his high-energy, explosive filmmaking style, wasn't exactly known for being the easiest director to work with.
All grips on hand with this thing. It is not to move under the tail. You understand me?
Yes, sir.
All right, am I very clear?
Yeah.
Good.
He made life on the set of Transformers very difficult for Megan, and in a 2009 interview, she described her experience working with him, saying, "He's like Napoleon, and he wants to create this insane, infamous, madman reputation. He wants to be like Hitler on his sets, and he is, so he's a nightmare to work for." Comparing Bay to Hitler really didn't go down well, not just with him, but also with Steven Spielberg, who was the executive producer for the movies. Spielberg is Jewish, so Megan's comments really rubbed him the wrong way, and according to Bay, he explicitly asked him to fire her. Had Megan apologized, she might have been able to salvage the situation, but she was young and brash at the time and decided not to. This led to her being booted out of the franchise and losing the opportunity of a lifetime. After this all went down, she did an interview with Jimmy Kimmel where she recounted her first experience working with Bay, and like her previous comments comparing him to Hitler, she didn't paint him in a good light.
What is it like working with the director Michael Bay, who from all accounts appears to be insane?
Yeah, well, he's infamous for being a sort of tyrant, I guess, on set. But the first time I ever worked with him, actually, I had just turned 15, and I was an extra in Bad Boys 2.
Really?
And yeah, they were shooting this club scene, and they brought me in, and I was wearing a Stars and Stripes bikini and a red cowboy hat and like 6-inch heels. And they took me to Mike, and he approved it. And they said, you know, Michael, she's 15, so you can't sit her at the bar, and she can't have a drink in her hand. So his solution to that problem was to then have me dancing underneath a waterfall getting soaking wet. And that's
perfectly wholesome.
At 15, I was in 10th grade. So that's sort of a microcosm of how Bay's mind works.
Yeah.
This was the other big problem she had with Bay while working on Transformers. He would sexualize her every chance he got.
Yeah, did you do that? That's pretty hot. Woo, mama, yeah. Megan, you gonna give it good to me? No, then I'm gonna slap your ass with this dowel.
As you can see, it was pretty creepy, and Megan has addressed that period of her life in later years, saying that she felt like an object.
I don't think there's anything wrong with being sexy. It's just the problem that that part was so loud that it muted out the rest of who I was.
After parting ways with the franchise and having some time to mull over everything that happened, Megan realized that the way she handled the situation wasn't the best, so she reached out to Bay to apologize.
I was young when a lot of that was happening, and I was really self-righteous. In my anger, I thought I was right to speak the way that I spoke. And as I got a little older, I understood, regardless of whatever my issues were, they should always have remained private. You should never blast someone like that in public. And so I reached out and just said, I hope this movie does amazing, and it will.
From there, they smoothed things over, and they actually worked together again on the 2014 Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles movie. As an actor, you rarely have control over the projects you're a part of. This means that all too often, things are done in a way you don't agree with, but there's nothing you can do. You end up just trying to make the best out of what you're given, even if you have to do so through gritted teeth.